Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Paul May. I'm the Vice Chair of Avon Fire Authority, and I welcome you to this meeting this morning. Can I just remind everybody that because it's being recorded, it is essential that you actually, when you're speaking, you push the button to make sure that you're recorded for the purposes of the recording. So I'll just start off by apologies for absence. We've had Councillor Kent, but he's here. Councillor Riddle and Councillor Williams and Councillor Connolly. So the emergency evacuation procedure, please note that there are no planned fire alarms today. If the alarm does sound, please leave the meeting room via the exit doors, and I will lead you to the car park where a roll call will be taken. The declarations of interest, I've not had any declarations of interest, so none advised. Public access, we've had no requests for that either. So in terms of Chair's business, I want to welcome you all to the meeting. And we had, for the record, we had an informal meeting with our external, internal and internal auditors before the meeting started, which was very positive. And Zoe was present as the clerk to the Fire Authority, and I think we all agreed that it would be worthwhile having such a meeting once a year, and the timing of which we can probably agree at some later date. But I think it was worthwhile, and it's an opportunity for any informal issues to be dealt with. And our advisor, David Powell, was also there, and David asked some good questions, as always. David, thank you. Right, this meeting is taking place at Severn Park. We're also recording the meeting for the public to view on the Fire Authority YouTube channel. We'd like to welcome SWAP, which are our new internal auditors, and it's really important that you're here, and thank you very much for that. So by obviously following on from that, it's important that we also say thank you to RSM, who've been our internal auditors now since 2018. So a big thank you to you, but I understand that you are still coming to one more meeting with one issue that's been left open. So I think that's really, really important. So a big thank you to you and a big welcome to you. And you're just here as the external auditors, and welcome to you as always, Craig. Thank you. So I'll hand over to Zoe at this point.
Thank you. This is just a brief opportunity to just remind everybody, as part of our ongoing commitment to inclusivity, I'm deaf. I have placed around the room some Bluetooth devices that are paired with my hearing aids that assist me personally, but would just ask that wherever possible everybody speaks one at a time, and that if you can, when you are speaking, look in my direction so that I can lip read, but I am aware that there are others in the room that would benefit from that as well. So yeah, if we could all speak one at a time and could keep our voices as clear and as sufficiently loud as we can, that would be very much appreciated, and obviously use of the microphones as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Zoe, and I'm one of the ones also have those issues. So can we do the introductions then? I introduced myself briefly at the start. I'm Paul May. I'm a councillor in Bath and North East Somerset, and I represent the wards of Pensford and Whitchurch Village, which is on the edge of Bristol. Over to you, Tim. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Yasin Mahmoud Lawrence, Bristol City Council.
Councillor Tim Kent, Bristol City Council.
Councillor Ronka Seni, Bath and North East Somerset.
Councillor Jane Stansfield, South Gloucestershire Council.
Councillor David Wilcox from the fine City and County of Bristol.
Thank you very much. And can we then introduce the officers? Start with you, Zoe, please.
Good morning, Zoe Coombs, Clerk and Monitoring Officer to the Authority.
Good morning, I'm Verity Truscott, Statutory Finance Officer.
Morning, Emma Bowen, Democratic Services.
Morning all, I'm Matthew Crevetto, I'm the Group Manager for Baines and South Gloucestershire.
Good morning all, my name's Steve Quinton, I'm the Manager responsible for Prevention and Protection.
And good morning, I'm Simon Flood, I'm the Performance Manager for Avon Fire and Rescue Service.
Good morning, Caroline Taylor, Head of Corporate Assurance and Continuous Improvement.
Hello, I'm Lorna Winyates, Corporate Risk Advisor.
And I think there's one more officer. Oh, sorry. Oh, David.
Yeah, good morning. I'm David Powell. Just because I'm not an officer, I'm the independent member of the committee. Thank you.
I was going to come to you afterwards. It's just that we excluded Luke from the introductions.
Good morning, everybody. Luke Gazzard, Assistant Chief Fire Officer for Service Delivery.
Thank you. So, David, you've introduced yourself. Can we introduce very briefly the auditors as well, please?
Craig Sullivan, External Audit Partner from Bishop Fleming.
Morning everyone, Sam Hawkins, Assistant Manager at RSM.
Good morning, Matthew Stacey, the Manager working at RSM.
Morning, Jodie Brommel, working for SWAP.
Morning all, Dan Newins, Director at SWAP.
Right. I just got one thing to mention. Thank you very much, Luke. That we remind you, everybody, that the HMI held a hot debrief with the Chief Fire Officer last Friday. Full details can't be discussed at this meeting, but the final letter will be shared with members in June once the embargo is lifted. Also, in terms of Bath, reminded that the Bath rebuild process is now beginning and crews have now moved into their temporary accommodation. Regular progress updates will be provided to members. And to remind you that if we're on the papers we've got, we may have to go into private session, particularly around one of the risk reports. So when we do that, we then have to exclude members of the public from the recording and any that happen to be in the meeting today. Right, so remind you again that I've already failed 3 times as the chair to remember to press your button when you're speaking, please. And the normal voting I'll bring in is that I'll ask you to any votes against, any abstentions, and then votes for, which is the normal way of doing things. So moving on the agenda then, the meeting of the 5th of December, I wasn't present because I was poorly, so could somebody propose those minutes, please? Thank you, Jane. And seconder, David. So they do have an open minute, but also exempt minutes. If you want to discuss any of those, then we can, in actual fact, then go into private session at the end. But can we just accept those minutes as being acceptable? Anybody got any queries? Right. So have I got something to sign?
Yeah, we can do that at the end. That's no
Okay,
problem.
yeah.
So are we happy that it's the same proposer and seconder?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, so on the other meeting was on the 13th of February, which I was at, so these got to be approved as well. So I'll move those minutes. And can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, David. David Wilcox. Right, so that's the procedures over. So we're now moving over to you, Simon, to present the performance information report, and with Steve as well.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning again, councillors and colleagues. Performance report in front of you is looking at the first 9 months of the current financial year, so it's from April to the end of December. As usual, it's supported by 2 products. So Appendix 1 on page 41 of your pack is our corporate scorecard that lists all of our corporate indicators organised against our 6 key objectives. And Appendix 2, which is on page 43 of your pack, is a subset of those same performance indicators, but just a little bit more information. And these are the ones we produce at service level and also at each fire station, and we send out to the stations for display. And I believe that is sent down to members as well. Each of these, Emma, is that still correct? Yes, it is. Thank you. Okay, so we use a very simple red, amber, green mechanism to monitor the performance against the metrics. And if you can refer to the scorecard, you'll see that the vast majority of the metrics we're on target for are showing as green, which is good because it means we fulfilled the promise to the public and the fire authority about reducing risk in the community by keeping on target with these metrics. What we do at this meeting and internally through our own processes is concentrate on the metrics that are off target, which are presenting risk to us because we're not meeting the target that we've set, and concentrate upon looking at whether we need to mitigate and introduce things to get us back onto target for those. And that is very much the focus of the paper today. So there are 6 of those metrics that are off target. Under prevention, we've got about deliberate primary fires, deliberate secondary fires, and completion of home fire safety visits. Under protection, we've got about the re-inspection of the premises that we've agreed to inspect under our site-specific risk inspection programme. Under resilience, we've got about sickness within the fire service, and under improving our service, we've got the percentage of near-miss health and safety incidents that we've recorded. So what I propose to do is that we'll consider each of those in turn, then open up to questions from members, and then we'll look at the recommendations and see if we're happy to accept those. So we look at the first one of those, which is about prevention. We've got about deliberate primary fires, and actually if we take the 2 of these together, because there are a lot of linkages between the 2, because they're both about deliberate fires. So we've got about deliberate primary fires excluding vehicles. So just for awareness, a primary fire is basically anything that's in a building or a vehicle that was fit for use before it was set light to. There are some other complexities to it, but that's the gist of it. Yeah. We're off target of that with 277 recorded against a target of 149. So we've had 186% of the target has been recorded. And for deliberate secondary fires excluding vehicles, we're off target with 840 recorded against a target of 725, which is 116% of target. So we talked about this at the December meeting of AGOC, and we talked about the things that we've put in place, really because there's not a lot we can do about influencing what has happened, and a lot of these indicators are really off target because of the exceptionally hot weather we had through the summer. So if you look at the target tracker on page 43, you can see on the left hand side it's got the graphs that give information about those, and you can see that the deliberate primary fires is the top left hand graph there, and deliberate secondary fires is the bottom left hand side. And you can see we had exceptionally high numbers in July and August. So what we proposed and what we talk about in December is really to have a plan in place if we have similar, if you like, hot weather for the next year and subsequent years, and that is recorded in paragraph 5.2 of what we plan to do. And that equally applies to deliberate secondary fires as well. What I'm pleased to report, and this is in paragraph 5.3, is that since the report that we've got in front of you, the numbers recorded in the subsequent months are significantly reduced. And I can report also for the numbers in January and February that we have sight of, that we've recorded post the preparation of the paper, also have quite significant reductions of numbers. So we will not meet target, but certainly for deliberate secondary fires, we're going to be a lot closer to target because we have had some exceptionally low numbers in the subsequent months, which is good news.
Simon, can I just ask a question? Is that being replicated across the country?
It's something I was going to talk about, yes. So if you remember you weren't doing that, but the last AGOC meeting, we did talk about across the country there have been a a similar increase in deliberate fires, and it is something that continued. So it's something that I know through the National Fire Chiefs Council and their prevention strand, they're looking at what we can do on a national basis. So it is something that's been replicated across the country. The other thing I was going to say about it is though we're off target, it is important to reassure members and the public that the number of fire incidents is quite small. So if you think across all of the Avon area, for the 9 months that we're reporting, for deliberate primary fires we've had 277, and for deliberate secondary fires we've had 840. So it is a relatively small issue, but obviously it's something that we are responsible for the fire service in trying to prevent fires, so it's something that we'll keep our focus on in future. Okay, thank you. So the next one I wanted to talk about that is off target is about the completion of home fire safety visits. That's in paragraph 5.5. We'd recorded or undertaken 4,298 against a target of 5,250. So we completed 82%. And the area manager for prevention and protection, which is Steve on my right here, has put in some information about what we're planning to do to mitigate that and improve for future. And I am pleased to report as well that since the publication of this, the subsequent months, we have increased the volume of the home fire safety visits that we've undertaken. So we've got some information about that, about what we're planning to do up to paragraph 5.7. So it's an improving trend, and the other thing we're looking to do for next financial year is to be a little bit smarter with our target setting. So we're looking in a more holistic way, one of the availability of hours of work for our crews, which is something that Group Manager Gavetto is going to be talking to us a little bit about later with regard to productivity, and also the other, if you like, newer things that we're also doing, particularly with regard to prevention, with the audits and the site-specific risk informations, to make sure that we're not setting unrealistic targets for our fire crews to achieve this work. So it's something we're looking to do better to make sure that, say, what we're asking to do is achievable and realistic. So I'm hopeful that we will set a better target and a more achievable target for the next financial year, and we've got a number of meetings that are happening about that currently. So if I could pause and pass over to Steve.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Chair. Yes, as I attended the December meeting, and I sort of warmed us up there around the target for the remainder of the year. And Simon's absolutely right. Historically, and forgive me for those that have heard this before, but we set a target based on what we perceived was our capacity, and the great work that Matt's done around the capacity now allows us to build a target that is more realistic based on the capacity and capability of our staff across both our whole-time workforce and our specialist prevention staff. I think the positive, which is not shown here and can be provided further, is actually this year we've seen the most number of referrals that we've ever had, and we've completed the most number of home fire safety visits we've had since 2018. So I think the positive is, if we take how we've set the targets previously, we are seeing a year-on-year increase in targeted activity to those most vulnerable. And we are still within the top 5% of the country based on the Home Office, the HMIC criteria for most targeted home fire safety visits. So we don't get criticised, which is a positive way that we're turning up and just delivering a home fire safety visit to anybody. Our visits are risk-based, so we are focusing on the most vulnerable, which obviously then take longer, which then reduces your ability to carry out more visits. So the picture is massively improving, and that's credit to the whole-time crews and to my specialist prevention staff that we are seeing that year-on-year increase. So as Simon's quite right, we will be setting a target at the end of this month for the next reporting year, which will be more intuitive, will be more focused on actually the capacity available. And we hope to be able to bring back positive news around that correlation between the two, rather than just a finger in the air going, well, this is what we think. We've done some considerable work around what the capacity is, and there may be challenges along the way with that, and as Simon's touched on, there are seasonal trends as well, and we allow a certain percentage of around 3,000 visits for our firefighters to complete every year. Obviously, an increase in operational activity will impact their delivery on prevention and protection, so we factor that in with those specialist staff as well. So it's an improving picture, and I'm really pleased on that, but obviously I'm comfortable that we have the strategic oversight, the reporting and the management of that to be able to tackle those problems, to see them head on, as opposed to being reactive, which is what potentially we've been previously. And as I say, Simon could provide the data and the graphs that show that year-on-year increase. So I'll stop there, Chair, and then open for any questions on this particular item.
David?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to go back to the primary fires issue that we were talking about just a minute ago. Has there been any recognition from His Majesty's Government that fire and rescue services will need extra resources to deal with these sorts of fires? Because I'm assuming we're not the only fire and rescue service that has seen this massive increase.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. I think this is an issue that's been identified by the National Fire Chiefs Council and fed back into MHCLG. I'm not aware of any additional funding that will come from that stream because I think the incident numbers are relatively small compared to other incident types. So I'm not aware of any funding that's coming towards us or any other fire and rescue service.
Thank you.
David?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The issue about the home fire safety visits, I went back through the scorecards that we've had, and they're very easy to analyse and understand, the ones that we've had for every committee. My recollection, this has always been red. So you're now saying you're going to have a more intuitive target, presumably based on data, but you say intuitive, but data-based. Are you saying you're going to adjust down the target, and can I be clear about the reasons about that? Is that to do with resourcing? And the other question I got, which is slightly cheeky, is if it's always been red, why haven't we done anything, or you done anything about it before?
Thank you for your questions. Yeah, it's something that's made me go very grey over the years, and I was previously 6 foot tall. So, however, yeah, you're absolutely, there is a resource issue here. And as I say, historically, we have done very much. This is the capacity we believe we can complete. Oh, sorry, this is the numbers we believe we complete based on the capacity. What we've now done is a significant piece of work looking at effectively, for want of a better word, a time and motion study of what capacity our operational crews have. And therefore, we're now able to go, well, actually, where we thought there was this much capacity, there's not actually that much capacity. And so, therefore, the target will be reduced, in a sense, for our whole-time staff, because we've now got that time and motion. But actually, there's an increase overall because of my prevention staff have actually got more capacity to deliver more visits. So we will actually see a slight increase of an overall target for next year. But the balance between who completes those visits will be more proportionate and data-led, which hopefully answers your sort of first part. And yes, and why it's always been red is because we've not had that data to be able to understand what is the capacity of our whole-time workforce. In reality, we are now asking more and more, and it probably goes back to Councillor Wilcox's sort of comment question really around resourcing and demand. As a service, we are seeing our demand increase in specialist areas, not necessarily across incidents, and therefore that has taken the capacity away from, historically, from prevention and protection activity. And it must be said that the focus on prevention and protection activity is now becoming much more nationally driven. Post-Grenfell, obviously, from protection, but also now prevention is playing catch-up, and so there's those increase in expectations nationally and what we need to achieve. So that's hopefully answered your questions.
Just one very quick follow-up, if I may. I'm hoping you're going to say yes to what I'm going to ask you. This is tied into the operational productivity review.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It links to the cause of concern related to the final element of the prevention cause of concern, and obviously it's linked to our improvement programme 2.6. 3.16, yeah. So it links to that whole piece, yeah.
Steve, thank you. Luke?
Yeah, I think it's just also worth noting that the resources within the prevention team were referred to by HMI in the last inspection, and we got a cause of concern for that. So Steve's been working over many months, actually, around a business case to bolster his resources in that team, additional people. That business case is coming to our SLT at the end of this month, and I'm hoping for a positive outcome, which then drives that increased deliverable.
Tim Kent?
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to go back to the issue of the deliberate fires, primary and secondary. So I can see you've put measures, talked about measures to try to reduce those, but a lot of those seem to be targeted at secondary fires, so sort of like grass, open space, abandoned buildings. Could you just explain a little bit more about the increase in the primary fires, which seem to probably have a higher risk to human life, and what measures are going to be taken to try to reduce those? Because I can sort of see the reason for the upshift during the summer months for secondary. I was sort of scratching my head a little bit around why there's such an upshift for primary. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, it's a really valid point, a really well structured point. In that the secondary fires are quite easy. That they are very seasonal. It is grass, and there's not a lot we can do about that. Sometimes there is education through our Children and Young People's Department and for the Serious Violence Duty around deliberate fire setting in the summer months, and you'll see those seasonal trends through school holidays and things like that as well. The deliberate primary fires is a really interesting one. The numbers aren't big, as Simon has touched on, but there is still a focus for us. For instance, prisons is an area that is seen an increase in fires over the last 12 months, 18 months really. There are measures in place now to reduce those, because when they used to be able to smoke in prisons, they removed those and provided people with vapes, and then people worked out that you can set a fire using a vape, and you still can. So prisons now have brought in a different type of vape where you can't do that. So we're hoping to see a reduction there, and we're starting to work with adult fire setting to understand behaviours so we can target repeat offenders effectively. But there is that element also around utilising our fire investigations teams to look at those trends, to then work with police colleagues and then tackle that deliberate fire setting behaviour. Our challenge is, and it's not as bad as it was previously, but a number of it is still related to theft, certainly vehicle fires, where they are used and then they're set fire to. We don't see that as much as an increase as we used to many years ago, but that still is a factor that also affects. So there's two elements there. There's the criminality element of one part, which we work with police colleagues on, but then there's also that other element around, well, okay, how can we then present those fires? And it's also making sure that we provide business fire safety advice using our protection teams, because that's around security around premises, making sure that their premises are secure, they comply with the fire safety order, where there's certain aspects there around mitigating the effects of fire. So it sort of goes twofold across the protection element as well, which sits with myself as well. So it's a challenge, because it almost feels like we're always playing a little bit of catch up, because we're fighting against, or we're battling against an unknown and people's behaviours. But what we can do is target where we utilise our legislation appropriately, and our specialist staff, like I say, our education department and our fire investigation department, to try and build that bigger picture to do the upstream firefighting, for want of a better word, as opposed to being that reactive nature.
Thanks. Just one quick follow-up question then. Do we suffer a great deal from deliberate agricultural fires? So are people burning off fields, or is that a practice that has long been abandoned?
It is a practice that is, whether it's long been banned is a challenge. We see very little of that now, in fairness. And for us, it's how it's recorded, and we have a long conversation how we record such fires, because a bonfire technically would be a deliberate secondary fire, but it's not arson. And whereas agriculture, that's a deliberate fire, but we would record it and then note it within the fire report slightly differently, because it's technically still a deliberate fire, but not in the sense that it's criminal. And so it's how those are recorded, and we often, the fire investigation team, work closely with Simon about making sure we record it accurately, because that can then spike figures one way or the other. So, but we don't, historically though, we don't see many agricultural fires. Barn fires, as a sense as well, have also actually reduced, and I think that's because of work that NFU do, work that we've done rurally, means that people are more aware about rotating their contents to make sure they don't self-heat and things like that. So,
Simon, you want to come in?
Just going to add, we do a lot of work with our fire officers who do the incident recording as well about what we mean by a deliberate fire and an accidental fire. So deliberate really means that we have evidence to suspect that it was arson or with malicious intent. And it's interesting in some ways, because we used to, across the fire sector nationally, call those fires malicious fires, and they changed it to be deliberate. And I think sometimes that's made it more difficult for us, because sometimes the fire crews will think, well, you did deliberately set light to that agricultural waste that you wanted to get rid of, but then what we should be doing is to say, okay, do we think your intention was arson or maliciously, or were you just trying to dispose of waste? So it's sometimes a quandary, and sometimes that can make quite a difficult decision for our fire officers. So if you can think of a scenario where a fire crew attends in a park a disposable barbecue that has been put into a waste bin, and because it was still warm, it has set light to the waste that is in the bin, but there is now nobody there. So do we think that is deliberate, as in we're thinking we suspect that somebody did that with malicious intent, or do we think it's accidental, as in someone was just a bit careless? So it is quite difficult for us to do, and a lot of time it's struggling to do it. But we do a lot of work with educating the crews about how to record, and also the quality assurance of checking. And against each incident, we do ask them to record their thought processes as to how they've arrived at the decision to say whether it's accidental or deliberate. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Onkar?
Thank you. On home fire safety visits, so what is the current shortfall against the annual target?
So obviously this report was produced before the last few months, so we think we'll be just short of 1,000, less than 1,000 short of our annual target. So again, that will be an increase on last year, but obviously we won't meet that target. But again, it's that improving picture that we are still improving year on year.
Thank you. And on the fire safety inspection, so how many inspections remain to reach the planned level?
In relation, to the home fire safety visits or fire protection?
Fire safety inspections.
Oh yes, so that's in relation to the protection element of site-specific information. I don't. There is 80 out of, well, we're currently 65%, so we've got 64 left at the time of writing this report, I believe. I can get an updated information for you by the end of this meeting if required. That currently sits, whilst it's a protection issue, the reporting currently sits outside of my directorate. However, I'm not going to use that as an excuse. I can get that data for you. But again, I would argue the performance there as being increasing based on what the re-inspections frequencies we touched on last time. We were looking at changing the re-inspection frequencies to ensure that we met a realistic target of what we could achieve. So, but yes, we are improving on that as well.
Thank you. And lastly, on the sickness, staff sickness, because sickness is above the target. So I just want to understand, is there like a pattern, which staff group or a department accounts for most of the increase?
I will defer that one and use my sloopy shoulders for that one. That doesn't sit within my directorate, and I think Simon will come on to that separately in a minute, if that's okay, Councillor, and we'll answer your question. All right.
Can we, I'm aware that time's going on, but I've got one or two quick queries as well. Listening to your query, your answer to David's query, on the home visit, it appears to be your capacity to be able to do it. Is there any evidence base that you're actually using, and can you bring that back at a future stage so we can actually see why you're doing that number? Because listening to it as a councillor, it sounded like, oh well, we put in a high target, so we'll reduce the target. And it just felt to me a little bit uncomfortable. But if it's evidence-based, then I don't have a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I can bring that, Councillor. But Ben, to clarify that the target is actually going up next year. So overall, we are increasing year on year, and our target next year is going to be 500 or so greater than this year. So our work is evidence-based, as was stated, and I can show that. But actually, we are looking at an increase next year based on that capacity across both sets of workforce. All right. So
thank you, Steve. And the other one is there's reference quite clearly to risks, and are those risks going to be picked up in the later report from Lorna?
Yes, we have a number of risks within CRO2, which is the corporate risk, and we're comfortable with the level of those are at the moment. In short, we are complying with our legal obligations by providing fire safety advice. How we choose to do that is up to us as an authority, and the National Fire Chief Council and government recommend certain ways, but it's not a risk for us at the moment, and it's not highlighted as an exceptional risk because we are actually complying with what our legal duties are. It's just internally whether we think that's good enough.
Okay, so Simon, you've got some the rest of the report?
Yes, if we could, that's good. Just to reassure members as well that each of our corporate scorecard metrics links over against a corporate risk, so there's clear mapping to say which ones influence which. And if we're off target with a metric on the scorecard, that does influence the corporate risk. I'm sure Lorna will cover some of that. So just very briefly, because we covered some of this already, but under protection we've got about the site-specific risk inspections that we're off target with the percentage of re-inspections that are done within the date that we have set. It was a new thing for us this current financial year, and we started slowly, but we are getting better. We're not likely to meet end-of-year target, but we are improving. And if you remember at the last meeting in December, we talked about how we have scheduled the visits, and we're changing it to making it more in line with the fire service sector nationally to make sure that we make the ones that present the highest risk to us, we do within the shorter period of time. So we've rescheduled it to make it more realistic, but also I think more effective. So just a little bit of information about that, and paragraphs 5.8 to 5.12 give you a little bit more background about all of that. Under resilience, we're off target for our sickness. So we've lost 7.92 shifts per full-time equivalent against a target of 7.14. And you see in paragraph 5.13, we've had quite a high amount of sickness over the winter of this current financial year. We do have good monitoring information about our sickness, so we know exactly which staff groups are having the sickness, where they're based, what the reasons for the sickness for, the length of the sickness, and all of that is on one of our live Power BI dashboards that we make available to staff throughout the service. And for managers in particular with their staff, after a period of sickness, it's very easy for the manager to look at sickness patterns for that individual and make decisions about whether there's any further work that we need to do to assist that person with their return to work and their welfare. It is a national increase in some types of sickness, so we've got good information internally, and also to some extent externally through the National Fire Chiefs Council we benchmark sickness information, so we have good information about national trends as well that we are sight of. A few things we're doing to try and change to improve. Paragraph 5.17 points out about our, if you like, our human resource and management system, which is a system called Firewatch. Historically, we've probably not used it to the best advantage to us. So it's an electronic system that allows us to better manage sickness, but we have, if you like, not empowered managers to use the system fully in the past. But that is something that we're rapidly looking to change to make sure that managers are more involved about the recording and have better availability of information to help them manage sickness. So that's certainly an improvement. We're also looking at continuing with the toolkits and guidance that we have for staff, and continuing with the communication about those to people, so all managers and members of staff are aware of their responsibilities with regard to managing sickness, which is something that is a continued journey, but we recognise that we need to continue to communicate and to make those tools so they're readily available to managers. And I said a little bit about the increased transparency that we've got through our new dashboards to managers for managing sickness. So I don't think I had anything else that I wanted to say with regard to sickness. So if we just finish off and then we can open to questions, if that's okay. Because the last metric that's off target is under improving our service, and that is about the percentage of near-miss health and safety incidents. So really what we're saying there is that we think that a good culture of health and safety means that of the incidents that we've recorded, about half of them should be near-miss incidents, and that's what our health and safety manager advises us is evidencing a good health and safety culture. So you can see there in paragraph 5.22 we actually started the year very well. In the first quarter of the year we achieved 50%, but performance has slipped away a little bit since then. Two things I'd say about that. One is that the number of incidents is still relatively small, and always where you have a small number of incidents, a small change can make a big percentage difference to them. But we do recognise that there is more that we can do with communicating and monitoring and getting information out to crews and to all of our staff about the appropriateness and the need to report a near-miss instance. So we have a little bit of plan that is set out in paragraphs 5.24 and 5.25 to improve that and make sure that we're going to meet this target for the next financial year. So if I can pause there and just ask if there are any further questions, that would be super.
Thank you, Simon. Anybody got any questions? David first, then Onkar.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask a question about the health and safety regime at Avon Fire and Rescue. Are health and safety incidents that are reported while they are on, firefighters are on an active call-out treated differently to corporate or health and safety incidents that happen when they're not on a call-out?
I mean, certainly ones when they're on a call-out, so as an incident is live, there are all sorts of procedures that we have in place for the health and safety of the teams. So we've got all sorts of things. So, for instance, if any of the breathing apparatus fails, then there are all sorts of processes and things for making sure that the safety of the operational crews at an incident is assured and resilient and all of those sort of things. Really, with these, I think we'd be talking about reporting it after the event as opposed to a live incident. So these are after the event, if you like, which isn't to say that if there's a health and safety incident at a live operational incident, after the event we would record it on the health and safety system. But we have some very strong processes in place at fire incidents to make sure that if anything happens health and safety wise, then the crews are protected and supported. Is there anything more that operational colleagues?
If I may, Councillor, we operate under a single health and safety framework for reporting. However, on operational duties, we have additional systems which are embedded, and in fact, I would suggest that Avon Fire and Rescue Service is leading nationally in relation to analytical risk assessments and evidence-based approach using analytical risk at scene to derive and drive fire activities. Should an incident occur on scene, as Simon has suggested, we have processes and procedures to deal with those. And there's a common framework of types of failure that we see on incidents that occur relatively commonly, such as breathing apparatus incidents or near misses, and so we have those frameworks there. Once we then finish the incident and come back into the organisational system, our standard health and safety procedures apply, and that would be common for all fire and rescue services. Where health and safety is an overarching element of need for the organisation, there can be no separation, and for myself and my operational teams, there is no difference between an accident on station and an accident on the incident grounds, because both are places of work for our staff.
That's good to hear. I'm gratified by that answer, but I think it might be useful for this committee to be able to actually gauge what happens on an incident and what happens outside of an incident scenario, so that we can make sure that the health and safety regime, while firefighters aren't fighting fires, is also being adhered to.
I'll bring Luke in at this.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that we could probably do a session on this in a members' briefing and provide more context around that.
That would be a good idea, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just want to refer to my previous question. Sorry if I missed in the verbal brief, but just want to re-clarify. Is there any sort of pattern, like certain staff group or a department accounts for most of the increase in terms of sickness target?
Yes, so we certainly have that information and analyse that information. With different staff groups fulfilling different roles, we do have, if you like, different patterns. So our fire staff who are out fighting fires in the community have a lot more instances of musculoskeletal injuries than our non-operational staff, and they're also exposed to, if you like, more instances of trauma and things which can affect mental health issues. So we have a higher percentage of mental health issues with the fire crews than we do with the non-operational crews. But I can assure you we have all of that information, and we do monitor it through our people services team, and we take action to support but also to challenge members of staff where we think patterns of sickness indicate there is an issue that needs to be undertaken. So we also make sure that when members of staff return to work after sickness period, that we have a proper monitoring process where we undertake a welfare check with that member of staff, which do two very important things. One, making sure that they are well enough to return to work, and we take into account anything that we need to adjust for their return to work, but also allowing managers to look at the sickness patterns and identify if there's any managerial work that needs to be done with that member of staff. So I suggest that, and again, we could, if we wanted to, either as a briefing or back to this committee, do a little bit more analysis, because we have the information available about those sort of patterns that we could bring back, if that would help.
Right. So, Simon, can I thank you very much for your report, and Steve and Matt as well for their input on this. I'm aware that I didn't take the vote around the minutes, so can we just do both the sets of minutes, if you don't mind? Anybody voting against those minutes? Anybody abstaining from the minutes? And anybody voting for the minutes? So can we just make sure that we've got that for the record for you, Zoe? And we need to approve this report. It says very clearly it's to note and approve. So can we then go through the same process? Any votes against? Any?
Proposer and second.
Oh, so thank you very much. We want a proposer and seconder. I'll propose it. Jane, second. Thank you. Any votes against? Any abstentions? Any votes for? Right, thank you very much, Simon and Steve and Matt. Okay, so moving on then to your report, Craig.
Thank you, Chair. So the paper you have in your pack today is the external audit plan for the year ending March 2026. This is our third year as your external auditors. The plan outlines the respective roles and responsibilities, also the scope of our work, which is to provide an opinion on the financial statements and also to review your arrangements, your value for money arrangements. The report also outlines our materiality, which is calculated at 2% of gross expenditure, which is a sector standard. So that's the balance that we're looking for in terms of making sure the accounts show a true and fair position. The level we'll report to you in our year-end report is 5% of that figure, so you're then able to look at the accumulation of unadjusted items to work out whether you would like to adjust them or not. We include in the report the significant risks, so our audit approach is risk-based, so that means we focus on the areas where there's more likely to be a risk of material misstatement. The risks are comparable with previous years. The one I will draw out is a change in the relation of the risk of valuation of land and buildings, whereby there's been a change in the guidance this year to enable authorities and the fire authority to use indexation rather than a full valuation from the valuer as well. And we're discussing with management the approach for that for the coming year. We also have a significant risk, again, in relation to the value for money arrangements, which is in relation to the HMI reports from previous years. So again, getting an update from the letter that's going to be being issued shortly will be a key for us to feed into our planning, and in relation to the conclusions that we'll reach as part of our audit process in relation to that. Section 3 outlines our timetable. And the timetable this year, we're bringing things forward. So we're doing some early interim testing. We're also looking for the value for money self-assessment to be completed before the year end as well, so we can make sure we're getting that information and looking at that and auditing that on an earlier basis. The audit field work will take place between July and September. And then the plan, all being well, is that we'll be a report to you in the September audit committee with the completion of the audit and the completion of the financial statements. We want to try and work towards that timetable, because the backstop date this year has been brought forward an extra month to January 2027. However, next year it will be brought forward to November. So if we can start working towards that September, October, November timetable, we're definitely on track then for future years for reporting. There wasn't anything else I was going to flag in relation to the audit plan. There's an update in relation to the sector updates at the back of the report, but I'm happy to answer any questions in relation to that.
Thank you, Craig. Verity, can I just ask those timescales and also the evaluation of the properties and things, plants, etc.? Your reaction, please.
I mean, from our perspective, we we welcome kind of shrinking that timetable because, as Craig said, the future deadlines are getting even tighter. So we need to make sure that we're able to meet those deadlines and work with our external auditors to do that. So we've already looked at, because obviously the audit falls across summer holidays, so we have already looked at the team's availability and making sure that we're planning to ensure that the team have got the capacity to support the audit. So I've got no concerns there. And in terms of the additional or the change in the kind of guidance around property valuations, we've had conversations and instructed our property valuers based on the new guidance. We've had conversations with external audit to make sure that that's in line with their expectations of the approach we need to take. So I'm happy that we've kind of made the adjustments we need to make to accommodate that change as well.
Luke, can I just ask you a question? Can we put in the minutes that when you've got that letter from HMI, that the copy does go to our external auditors?
Absolutely.
I think that's a yes. Right. So I'll ask for a proposer. I'll propose that we approve this report. And a seconder, please. Thank you, David. So we'll take that to the vote then. Those against, any abstentions, and those who approve. Thank you, that's approved. Wow, that's nice and easy for you. So we'll move on then to the internal audit programme, the plan, which is your report. Just to make it very clear that RSM have been our internal auditors. Your new auditors coming in, so you're doing the plan for this next year. So big welcome to you, and over to you, Dan. Or
yeah, thank you very much, Chair. So I will focus on taking us through the appendix document attached to the agenda today, and I'll use the page numbers as they appear in that appendix. So appreciate this is the first time you would have seen a swap report, so I will just go into a bit more detail than I might otherwise. So page 2 on the page numbers provides some key tiles there in terms of the factors that have come into determining the audit plan. So we've compiled a strategy for the next 3 years, mindful of the fact that there is finite resource for internal audit. So to ensure suitable coverage, we're looking across a 3-year period and then focusing on a 1 year at a time within that. So some key factors that have played a part in creating this plan. We've reviewed services key objectives and commitments, the corporate risk register, and we've had meetings both separately and as a group with key stakeholders, including members of senior management and also the chair of this committee. Page 3 of the document outlines coverage against the 6 commitments of Avon Fire. So as you can see, when considering the 3-year strategy, we're happy that there's reasonable coverage against each of the 6 commitments. Page 4, similar sort of diagram, but this is around kind of 5 key risk areas for fire and rescue services. And again, we're comfortable that there's reasonable coverage across the 3-year strategy period for those. Page 5, some more bits and pieces about SWAP really. So it's myself and Jodie's details, but also SWAP's conformance with internal audit standards and any conflicts of interest, consultancy engagement processes, and our approach to fraud. Page 6 is the performance metrics that have been agreed for the work. Pretty kind of standard ones, delivery and satisfaction of delivery. They'll be reported back as part of each update paper that we provide. And then pages 7 to 12 are the plan itself. So you've got the 3 years across that period. I won't go line by line on it, but obviously happy to take any questions about particular audit areas. Key things to mention there, we've got an outlined scope, obviously very high level at the moment, and each one will be actually determined as per dedicated scope and meetings for each review. The link to the core risk area is provided, and also a link to any corporate risk, the HMI, key areas of focus, and the 6 Avon Fire commitments. As part of the scoping meetings for each of the reviews, we'll also consider fire standards and how the work should and needs to relate to those. Our intention is that we'll deliver 2 reviews per quarter, providing 8 per year, and we'll also be conducting follow-up work throughout the year on previous actions raised. If I take us to page 13 onwards, that is the Internal Audit Charter. So that outlines our purpose, responsibilities and key roles and authority to information. It's basically our fallback. If there are any issues around independence or access to information and that sort of thing. And that includes responsibilities for ourselves as SWAP, you as members and also senior management. That was all I was going to do in terms of my update, but more than happy for any questions.
Thank you very much, Dan and Jodie. A very, very clear report. Thank you. Has anybody got any queries on CAR?
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Just a very quick question. So does the plan give enough coverage to cyber and IT risks?
Yeah, thank you. I was really mindful in doing the plan of wanting to make sure that there's at least something every single year around cyber and ICT. Obviously, there's, like I said, there's 8 slots in a year, so there's a limit to how many we can do on any area. As you'll see in the plan, at the moment they're just placeholders for exactly what they will be, so we've replicated the word in for each. Since the point of putting this document together, I've now had the opportunity to meet with the head of ICT, so we've determined that the review of focus, which will be Q3 of 26-27, will be around ICT governance, because there's a lot happening in terms of how things operate there. And then for future years, we'll determine those areas nearer the time as well. And there's also other bits outside of those dedicated reviews, so stuff like data protection you'll see on the plan, even things around the mobilisation system, etc., where IT and data is involved. So I'm comfortable in terms of coverage around that area.
David?
Thank you, Chair. So I've just found out who actually said no plan survives first contact with the enemy, and it was Helmuth von Moltke the Elder, a Prussian military strategist in the 19th century. And I say this because I'm really pleased that you produced a 3-year plan, but how much flexibility is there in actually adding items that might crop up into your plan, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question and the quote. You're absolutely right. It's important to have a good balance between longer-term view to make sure we've got coverage across that period, but not forgetting the fact that things crop up. We don't want to be stuck 2.5 years down the line, and these are the ones that we're definitely doing, and we've missed all of those emerging risks that have come along the way. Myself and Jodie and the corporate assurance team have a monthly meeting already scheduled where we can go through the plan as we're looking at it and any thoughts in terms of emerging risks, etc. There's complete flexibility around changing, adding to, revising, etc. the plan, and that will come to yourselves. So we'll formally come back with this time next year, but as part of each quarterly update, the whole plan will still be on there. So if something's cropped up and you feel that there's a new risk, or that one's no longer a risk, etc., there is absolutely flexibility around that.
Thank you.
Right, so a governance question then, because in terms of the papers, we're asked to approve the 26 to 29 plan. Sorry, David.
Thanks, Chair. Just a brief question. The councillors have picked up on the points I wanted to raise around good to see a 3-year plan. I think that's excellent, and it will be able to flex and change depending on pressures. The question I'd got, following up on the question around cyber, how does SWAP ensure it's got the right technical expertise, especially in an area like cyber, which seems to be developing so quickly? Thanks.
Sure, thank you very much. So at SWAP, we're just a little bit of background. So we've got around 95 auditors in total. Sitting under myself are our dedicated teams around client delivery, so Jodie manages, but we've also got dedicated teams for ICT and cyber, for counter-fraud and for data analytics. So in terms of your particular question around ICT and cyber, each of the individuals in that team are CISA qualified. They're vastly experienced in ICT reviews. So SWAP has 27 local authority partners and another 15 local authority clients. So they're used to delivering ICT related work across a full suite of local councils, fire and rescue services, police authorities, etc.
So I'll go back to my query. So what we're going to approve, I think, in my mind, is we're approving the 26-27 plan, and we're approving the 26 to 29 plan with flexibility. So just to make sure we've got that in the minutes moving forward. And the other thing, can I just ask a question? You said about the quality of the audit, is whether we're happy. Does the external auditor actually do a review of the quality of internal audit? I think I've asked this before.
I can answer that. We don't audit the auditors, but what we do is we liaise with the internal audit to understand what's in their scope, what they've completed, and we use it as part of our risk assessment. So is there anything coming out of internal audit's work that we need to change our approach to the external audit? So we do liaise with them, we do review their reports, but we don't audit them, no.
So I'll propose approval with that minor change that I suggested. All those against? Any abstentions? And can I have a seconder? Thank you, David. So, all those in favour then? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. So now we're coming back to our internal audit progress reports, which is RSM, our ex-auditors. I don't know how you describe yourself, but so can we go on to your report then, please, Matthew?
Thanks, Chair. So I'm going to kick things off.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm going to kick things off with the two internal audit reports, and then Matt will take you through just the progress update and then the draft annual opinion as well. So if we start with the key financial controls audit around devolved budgets, which is on page 95 of your packs. So the scope of this audit was on the devolved budget framework. During 21-22, we undertook a review of this area to assess the initial rollout of this approach, and as such, this time around, we were looking to determine whether that framework had been fully embedded and was operating effectively across the service. Overall, a positive report with a reasonable assurance opinion provided, with 2 medium and 2 low actions agreed. Just in conclusion, our review found that whilst the framework is broadly embedded and operational across the service, there are some areas that could be strengthened to ensure alignment with good practice and to mitigate those financial risks. So if I just provide some more context around the 2 medium actions that we've agreed. So the first one was around sort of the training controls that are in place. So we found that whilst there's some guidance and support available for budget holders, a more consistent and standardised training programme was needed to ensure that all of those budget holders are provided with regular induction and refresher training. So that was the first focus there. And then the second action was focused on standardising the approach with the budget holder meetings that they have with the finance business partners. Again, through our testing, there were some inconsistencies in terms of how often the budget holders were meeting with those business partners. So just, again, an opportunity to strengthen that framework and making sure that the budget holders have got the support they need. I'll pause there for any questions. Not sure if Verity wanted to add any comments, but yeah, happy to take any questions on that one.
Verity, can I just ask your reaction to that first point?
I don't think much additional to add. I think from my perspective, I think the very fair comments. I think the training one is a really important one to make sure that we are giving our budget holders what they need to be able to do their job and complete their role effectively in terms of budget management. So that's something that we're working on at the moment. And in terms of standardising the approach, again, I think because we have quite varying sizes of budgets, I think that's why the standardised approach hasn't been there. Some people have got very small budgets, some people have got much more significant budgets, but it's something that the team have already started to look at to make sure that we kind of bring that through.
Do we ever ask the question of who are the budget holders, whether we got that at the right level?
It's a good question. I don't know if we've reviewed that in detail in some time, but I don't think we've ever had any concerns raised that the wrong people are budget holders, but it's something that we could potentially take away and just revisit. I think it comes as part of potentially a bigger piece of work around how do we structure our accounts, who looks after which bit of our accounts, which would then become quite a significant piece of work, but it is something that's kind of in our minds in terms of how our financial system is structured, which then assists our budget holders in doing their role as well. So it's something that is something that I've started to look at and will continue to look at over this the next financial year.
So one more question for me. I'm sorry if I'm doing this, and that is the financial system. Is it actually does it work? I know that's a daft question, but you understand what I'm saying, because there are different systems out there, and it's whether and how often do we review whether it's effective for managers.
So I think the system does work. I think that we use a system that, we have licences that come through Bristol City Council, so we use the same system as them. It is structured in a different way to Bristol City Council, so we have built it historically in a way that worked for us. I think what we need to do is relook at whether that structure and the way it's been built is still suitable for us. And it's a good question around, is the system, or can we get what we need from a system better from another system? So we have a financial services contract with Bristol City Council. We're working on having a new contract put in place from the 1st of April 2026. As I'm sure you can appreciate, if we were going to change our financial system, there's quite a significant lead time we'd need to do to kind of implement, build and then embed a new system. So it's something that we're looking at, but it won't happen before. We will have to enter a new contract with Bristol City Council, and then we will have a look and see about value for money and whether the system is really delivering what we need as part of, as that contract runs.
Thank you. David? And David.
Thank you, Chair. Can I back up the comments that Verity's just said? Because in past lives I have deployed Aggresso systems, and I know that it's a very configurable system, shall we say, and you can tune it to be whatever you want it to be. And making sure that it's configured in the right way is essential. And to throw away a lot of that work that the Avon Fire and Rescue have done to make it what they want it to be would be an interesting choice, shall we say. We wanted to swap ships midway through. But I'd like to draw us attention to page 104 and the top paragraph there about meetings that were held that didn't have proper outcomes or minutes. And I'm really quite concerned by this, because we actually do need to have accountability of the actions that are taken at those budget holders meetings. I wonder if we could have some comment on that, please.
So that's something that the team are working on now as part of standardising the approach. So I think, as I said, when people have had really small budgets in the past, we've not necessarily had a structure of meetings for them and things like that, whereas larger budget holders, maybe there was a little bit more structure. So absolutely something that the team are looking at now to make sure that every budget holder has the same frequency of meetings. And if they end up needing, they're short and not much needs to be discussed, then that's fine, but the opportunity's there. And also that those meetings are recorded and actions are taken, so that we are following up on those as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up the point around training that the statutory officer has mentioned. And I noticed on the SWAP training, SWAP 3-year plan, in the second year there's a training audit. Is that going to pick up on financial training as well? Because one of the things I think it might be helpful for the committee to understand a little better is how many budget holders have you got? What training? Do you operate a license to practice type scheme? And how does the budget monitoring and support from the finance team help them manage their budgets? It's not for wider discussion now, but it might be something that would be helpful for the committee to understand, therefore, the risk and also the resourcing of that support. I'm not expecting an answer now, Verity, but it's just something I think that we might need to know, because there's a potential risk here, because if you look at issues that tie into fraud in the public sector, sometimes it is around systems that have been configured in a certain way, and it might be helpful to try and knit all that together. It's a comment, not a question, so thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so thank you very much. I think it's a very good report, and I think it's raised a couple of really important issues for us, so thank you very much on that. This is a report, looking at it, is actually just for scrutiny at this stage.
I don't know if there might be some further comment.
Right, okay. So he said, have you got any further comments? Thank you.
So yeah, there's a further report, so it's whether you want to look at agree that you've scrutinised each aspect of it, or whether you want to look at all of the reports and then determine that you've scrutinised all of the reports.
Right. What Zoe's saying is, do we scrutinise all the reports, or do we do them one at a time? I was working on the basis that we were going to do one at a time, if that's all right. Okay. So it's, I'll propose it then, and a seconder for this one. Thank you, Yasin. So, any against? Any abstain? And support. This is the scrutiny. Thank you. So, have I missed something then?
Yeah, because that was just the part we were just talking there about
Right.
the devolved budgets, but then there's also the
Service planning.
and the key financial controls. So there
Right.
are a number of appendices, so number of reports.
So, you would like a vote on each one?
No, I think that was just a pause in. Sorry.
Right.
I wonder if that was just a pause in presentation of the overall report, and then it's, once there's been the full presentation, then there will be a vote on whether you're satisfied that you've scrutinised the entire report and appendices.
Okay.
So I imagine that Sam's got something further to say. Yeah.
Yes, so if you're happy to, Chair, I'll move on to the service planning report, which is the next one in your pack. So this one's on page 113 of your packs. So the scope of this one focused on the annual service planning process and how information from all areas of the organisation are fed into this. Alongside this, we also considered how the delivery plan is monitored throughout the year in terms of sort of performance and delivery of that plan. So this is an area that we've not previously covered, but overall, again, was a positive report with a reasonable assurance opinion provided. We have 4 medium and 2 low priority actions agreed in there with management. So overall, we found that there was a structured approach in place in terms of setting the service plan with the use of instant data, horizon scanning and consideration of relevant legislation as well to inform the information within the plan. At the time of the audit, we found that there were lots of developments happening in the background, particularly around sort of the governance structure and the rollout of a new PDR process, which we've reflected in the report as well, which was expected to strengthen sort of the oversight and accountability in terms of the service plan. So again, if I focus on the medium actions, so some themes to pull out here. So whilst we found that there was a consultation strategy in place outlining the engagement strategies with key stakeholders, we did note that the information such as a timetable or calendar alongside that to show the engagement throughout the year with the stakeholders and then ownership of each of those activities could be included within that as well, just to strengthen the document. At the time of the review, the service, as mentioned, were updating the personal development review process to specifically include strategic priorities that aligned to the service plan. And this was really around promoting that accountability point across the service. And so as such, we've raised a medium action against that one. And then in terms of the final 2 actions, so these were looking at the annual delivery plans that sit alongside the service plan. And so this included the development and sign-off of those plans by the heads of department, and then also the monitoring against those delivery plans on an ongoing basis through the revised governance structure, just to make sure that there is that continuous sort of oversight and monitoring of progress in terms of any actions coming out of those delivery plans. Just wanted to highlight in terms of the 2 low actions, so these were more sort of housekeeping points. So for instance, just to ensure that key documentation, such as the planning process document, includes responsible owners for each stage, and that also the engagement activity carried out across the year is consistently recorded with any feedback and actions off the back of that as well. So yeah, again, overall positive report, and happy to take any comments or questions on that one.
Councillor Kent.
Thanks. Just around consultation then, because you sort of found some weaknesses in our reporting and processes. Are you happy with the actions being put in place by the officers, and have those now actually been implemented?
Yes, there was a meeting on Monday to start documenting the consultation strategy, which was to address this action, so I can provide assurance that meeting has happened and we are certainly going to get that action closed. the consultation activities were happening. It's more a case of formalising and making sure that's documented and there to be able to make sure it's followed robustly in the future. So that meeting has happened. I've not seen the output yet. It was only happened on Monday, but I'm aware that's taken place.
I think just to give comfort from our perspective, this has gone through our rigorous QA process, and where we've agreed those actions, it has, from our perspective, responded to the risks identified, so we're comfortable with actioning these. It'll give the right progress and controls in place to mitigate the gaps that we found. So yeah, we are comfortable with the work that will be undertaken.
Right, so are you happy if I then take a vote on this one as well?
My advice would be to let Sam finish presenting the entire report and appendices, and then you'll take
one vote at the end.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Zoe.
Thanks, Chair. I'll hand over to Matt, who will take you through the progress report and the draft annual opinion.
Thank you, Sam. So I'll take you through the progress report first. I would say for this one, the Appendix 5, which is the client service briefing, that one, for all emergency services needs briefing, that from our perspective, I'm not planning to talk to it in detail, but is there for, as we've said in previous meetings, if there's anything at this committee that people want to ask in terms of the questions that are raised in it, then I think that's useful too. One of the areas I would just draw attention to is around the building safety system side of it, and that was appreciating this is a service news briefing from November. There is one from February as well that we can share on with officers. Obviously, the incident that probably is quite prominent at the minute is the disaster in Glasgow, and I think that raises some interesting questions around high-risk properties and how close they are to public infrastructure. But just to put that, I suppose, out there in terms of updates at the moment. So in terms of the progress report, so as Sam's just presented, we've had the key financial controls, devolved budgets and service planning, which we've presented into this meeting. We have a section on action tracking, which I'll let Sam just talk through briefly in a second. But just taking you to Appendix A and the table within that, so that's page 5 of the report. And what that shows is the progress to date, and what you'll see off the back of that is we've now got 4 reviews that are fully completed and have now been to this committee. The final one for pensions is completed in terms of field work, and we're just going through the QA on the draft report to issue. So that will be issued in year. So in terms of overall progress, we're on track to complete the plan fully for the year, and that should then come into the June meeting, as the Chair's mentioned earlier, for us to present against. So I'll just pause there and let Sam talk to the action tracking.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, not too much to say on this. Just as standard, so I meet with the corporate assurance team to go through the action tracking process and just to provide some ongoing assurance there around the implementation of those previously agreed management actions. So you can see there in Appendix C the actions that we've closed since the last meeting. So I believe there's 9 actions in there. We've got some mediums that we've been able to close off, as well as a few low and advisory. So yeah, not too much to comment, but good progress in terms of implementing those actions overall.
Thank you, Sam. And what I'd just say is, because there is similarities between the progress report and the draft annual opinion, I'm happy to take that and then ask questions on both, or if there are particular questions on the progress report, I can take a pause and answer questions on that first.
David?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question about SSM 02, which is on page 137 of the big bundle, or page 7 of your report. So the service will investigate whether it's possible to digitise dispatch notes, and there seem to be 2 solutions to this, one that they can't and one that they will be, and the action seems to be closed. So what was the solution, please?
I'll jump in there. I think in terms of the detail of that action and the evidence that we looked at, I'd need to go away and have a look at that. But what we would have reviewed as part of the evidence is any sort of meeting minutes and discussions that would have been had around that process, and then the resulting outcome of that, and that's the evidence that we would have captured as part of that action tracking process. But happy to provide, outside of this meeting, the evidence that supports that as well.
I think that'd be useful, please.
David?
Thank you, Chair. again on the same page, there's numerous references there to safeguarding, and these actions have now been closed. That's my understanding on the tracker. Is that right? Yes? Yeah. So can we draw, as an audit committee, some assurance around the safeguarding processes in the fire service? Is it possible to do that on the basis of the work that you've done? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I do take the responsibility for safeguarding since it's in the prevention. Yes, as Sam has articulated, it was a reasonable assurance audit. The majority of the actions are around reporting up to scrutiny level and our training. 3 have now been closed, and we meet the requirements in line with the safeguarding processes. We work with our local authorities around those safeguarding processes as well. So there's 2 elements to it for us. There's the element around our non-statutory duty externally, but obviously our safeguarding responsibilities internally. And I can assure you that we are in a really good place. The audit gave us a reasonable assurance. The actions were 4 too low, 4 medium, something like that, or the other way around, which related majority to reporting and training, and just some a bit of digitisation around some processes, which we've now actioned 3 out of the 3, I think, and there's 2 more to go. One starts on the 1st of April when our new training plan goes out for all staff. And then the other part of that is linked to reporting of that and how it's then escalated through. So I think from a safeguarding perspective, we are seeing more referrals by our crews. So you can be assured that we're seeing more alerts to concern and more vulnerable people are being referred to other agencies. So I think actually our culture is very, very positive currently. And the training from the 1st of April will further support that.
So you made reference to Glasgow. I'm just wondering whether you've got any response to surrounding buildings from fires. Luke?
Probably pass over to Steve from a protection perspective in a minute because he's a specialist there. But I've already been in contact with my equivalent in Scottish Fire and Rescue. They cover the whole of Scotland. The incident's still ongoing, actually, in terms of the building collapse. We do know it was a vape shop where the fire started. But in due course, Scottish Fire and Rescue will share that national organisational learning, joint organisational learning across the rest of the UK, but it's a little bit too early at this moment in time. But from a protection perspective, Steve, anything?
Not at this stage, but again, in line with risk-based inspection programmes, which we're legally bound to have under our community risk management plan, we will look at the findings from that and determine actually if there's any action we need to do. The initial report will allow us to do some thematic inspections straight away in relation to the risks identified from that initial report, and then we'll look at that, but certainly can look and with if anything needs to be done around that, obviously, as we move forward.
I just wanted to quickly come back to your question because I've got the details in front of me now. So in terms of next steps, there is a system that will be implemented from June 2026. So in the nature of the action, what we were mindful of is we didn't want to write it in such a way that we couldn't close it until a year, 2 years from the audit. So from our perspective, we've been able to close it where there is that system implementation plan going forwards. There's discussions around what it will cover. And also there are elements of mitigation that are being put in place at the moment around dispatch notes and similar to ensure that in the interim there isn't an ongoing risk until that new system is in place. So yeah, in summary, the step that's been taken is to bring a new system in.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, have you got anything else? Move on?
Yes, I think we move on to the annual report.
Right, so I think we're now going to, in governance terms, just put up the whole report to satisfy you, Zoe. And so we're noting the report. Any against? Any abstentions? Proposed and seconded.
Yeah. So you've finished with the presentation of the entire report?
The progress report, we just have the annual report to talk through.
Okay.
But wouldn't that be a separate decision? I'll take your advice.
No, that's okay. Essentially, so the the recommendation, this paper is for scrutiny, and the recommendation is that essentially you've scrutinised all aspects of the topics covered within the reports and the appendices. So would suggest that you could hear about all of the report, all of the appendices, and then you agree that you have scrutinised or disagree whether you feel that you've scrutinised that in its entirety completely.
So, you've got one more report to report then. Thank you.
I'll keep it quite high level because I appreciate there's quite a lot still to get through within this pack, and we're coming up to about half an hour to go. From our perspective, you'll see that this document is plastered with draft across it. That is just because we are not currently at the end of the year. And in terms of our opinion, it does factor in the internal audits that we've covered throughout the year. It factors in the action tracking that we've done as well to conclude that actions have been closed. But it also covers things like attendance of this committee and seeing how governance operates in practice, as well as any incidents that might happen in year that aren't part of our internal audit plan but might affect our opinion in terms of governance, risk or internal control. So with that being said, as it stands at the moment, our draft opinion is the second line in terms of the 4 categories that we have, which is a positive opinion. And just to read that out to you, that is, the organisation has an adequate and effective framework for risk management, governance and internal control. However, our work has identified further enhancements to the framework of risk management, governance and internal control to ensure it remains adequate and effective. So that factors in the audits that we've talked to today, as well as a couple of others earlier in the year. And what I just draw attention to in terms of, for example, the stores and stock management audit, that was an audit that was asked for by the service as an area of known concern and weakness, and so it is using internal audit in the right way in terms of identifying areas where you can gain value from internal audit rather than steering us towards areas where you're expecting a substantial opinion, a green report, which, while it looks great, doesn't then give you what you need in terms of what we're able to bring. So in terms of the categorisations, we've given a breakdown of governance, risk and control as to what we've factored under each area. Some of the other elements around the action tracking, and obviously that's noting 2 high actions, 12 medium and 7 low, and 4 advisory have all been closed in year, which demonstrates the commitment that the service has put to not just having internal audit, but taking those actions forwards and implementing them to improve the overall assurance that we can offer there. The rest of the report is generally some standard wording we've got in there, and then the appendix, which just covers what we've already talked to in the progress report. So that's the report at a high level, but happy to take any particular questions. Come the 1st of April, we can issue this without draft as a final version.
Right, can I just, you said there's one other report, Sam, that's got to come back to this committee. Can you just outline that for us as well?
Yes, thanks, Chair. So that's the in Appendix A of the draft annual opinion. That's the pensions report there that you see at the bottom. So that one has actually just completed. So we're just working on the draft report now. So that will come in final to the next June meeting.
I think just to note as well, where we agreed the plan at the start of the year, we held a pocket of our allocation as contingency budget. So this pension review is a reflection of that contingency. So it was not picking an additional audit so that we could in year identify an area of risk and cover it, and that's where looking at pensions has come about from. So yeah, just to add that on really.
So I'll propose it. Can we have a seconder, please? Jane? Thank you. Right, so those against? Any abstentions? And those for, please. Get myself confused about the complexity of the report. Apologies on that. So we're now moving on, I think, to the operational productivity review. Matt, you're going to present that, aren't you?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me today. So last June, I was tasked with taking on action 3.16, which relates to an area of improvement identified by the HMIC in relation to productivity of whole-time firefighters. This links to expected work which was required by Home Office, now MHCLG, in relation to firefighter productivity being a key causal framework to which the fire funding methodology will be aligned, and that process is ongoing. Along with other organisations, we started to look at whole-time firefighter productivity, and the first port of call with that was to develop systems to capture that data set and actually how many hours each firefighter as an individual is completing against each work activity every day. MHCLG defined 4 key areas of work, the first one being response. That includes operations and prevention protection activity. Enabling activity, which is the work streams which allow that response activity to take place. Non-framework activity, which includes statutory meal and rest breaks, and other activity, which is a catch-all, which we shouldn't see any productivity within that space. We have good data sets within the organisation, but it'd be fair to say that the organisation is undergoing a transition in its digital framework and aligning those systems. And at the time of tasking into this, there was limited data and digital support or funding available. We did start to approach a system-based resolution or data capture that was based on a Firewatch program. That was quickly found by end users to be non-usable, and it accounted for up to 1 hour's worth of activity per day on trying to record activity. That was parked for the short while whilst we went ahead with a business continuity system, which was developed using an Excel spreadsheet. That has now been in place and in progress since October, with February's being the last report coming in this week and has been finalised. Although we are capturing hours against what is available and what was returned against those key areas of output, to read that as a lump sum would be incredibly difficult, because so far we've had upwards of 40,000 hours worth of data captured. So we've translated that into percentages of what we would expect within a working day, and then cross-map the two. You will see in the report within table 2 that has shown some discrepancies, and what we are seeing is that operations is accounting for between 16 and 17% of unexpected activity, although it is expected, and we see almost a commensurate removal or reduction in the prevention protection outputs. We can also read into the data set that we've acquired that we're seeing high levels of routines and administration being conducted by the crews over what we have allocated. The risk to us now is that we're seeing very limited capacity latent sat within operational teams, and that is affecting other areas of work. It is increasingly difficult to complete effective assurance against this, and as an example, if I have a team state that they've been on a fire incident for 1 hour, our logging system, which is digital, that records when they leave the station and turn back, might say that they've been out for 49 minutes. But what we're not seeing is that they've booked back on station before they've gone through the main gates. Then by the time they've got into the building, it's taken 2-3 minutes. By the time they've undressed, that's 5 minutes. And so there's a discrepancy there. So within that accuracy space, we're also are conflicted with a standard issue of self-reporting accuracy from end users. And to that end, there is a need now to progress this project forward into effective digitisation. This morning, our teams, including teams from Steve's team, met with Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service, who have an active system that we may be able to replicate. And internally, one of our digital leads has also presented a solution and is looking to show us that Friday next week. When we look at capacity across our operational teams, we can see that latent capacity will be released through 4 key streams of work the organisation is undergoing with both through the digital and data work, the Firewatch productivity work, the resource planning work, and the review of training. Each one of those elements will have an impact on those operational teams, and we're likely to see capacity released in those spaces. From the capacity reports that we've seen, we were able to work with Steve, Prevention and Protection, and the Head of Operations to realign expectations going forward in the year 26-27 in relation to the activities that we're seeing. And we are in the infancy of graphic equalising productivity between stations. So far, we have removed a significant amount of work from Hicksgate Station and reallocated that across the system. We have also done or completed a similar piece of work with Temple Fire Station and allocated pieces of their work across the remainder of the organisation. And from this month's data, we're looking now to rebalance activity between Kingswood and Weston-super-Mare and Avonmouth, where productivity differs significantly. That is an overview of the work that we've completed so far. I'm more than happy to take questions.
Councillor Kent.
Thanks. So thanks for the report. It was quite interesting. I'm a bit confused of why the expected allocation didn't think at any point fire engines would be responding and that fire officers' time would be taken up. Can you just explain why our previous expectations had not accounted at all for actually responding to operational incidents? Thanks.
Absolutely, Councillor. So when I was running the project, to look at the framework of how we've organised the working day is set for every station, and that was my starting point to look at what capacity was available in the day. Because of the transient nature of incidents, we're not able to allocate that approximately 1 hour 20 minutes to 1 hour 30 minutes on average per watch within that working day framework. What we've seen in the past is to create that effectiveness amongst our teams, we've had to push a common daily structure for every team to make sure that the activities that we're expecting are commensurate with the needs of the organisation. The quantity of operational output varies significantly between stations. We have some stations currently operating at around 5% of overall activity and others operating upwards of 30%. So to create a balanced daily output kind of tool that everybody works against would become really, really tricky. But to create a report that's usable from yourselves downwards through the organisation to our end users, I had to create a space where we're looking at what our expectations were, and where our expectations were for 4 hours prevention and protection activity a day. Fundamentally, that's our expectation. We understand that that's going to take away. We can now see that difference in balancing through that operational activity, and we're starting to address the balance in that. It's not that we never looked at it. It's to create a framework where people could read this accurately. We had to have a fixed starting point, and that the transient nature of those incidents wasn't possible to put them in and plan them. Yeah.
Onkar.
Thank you. So, which of the review recommendations are being prioritised for implementations first?
Could you,
in
relation to what? Apologies.
So, which of the review's recommendations are being prioritised for implementations first?
Come in there, I think, Councillor. I think, from my perspective, we need to digitise this system as much as possible to remove some of the inaccuracies in data that we've got and give us a much more richer data set. So that's one of my strategic priorities, to make the system completely digital. The other priority for myself, has been touched on earlier, is local risk management and annual delivery plans. So through this data set, we will be able to identify the capacity and productivity of every single station and then adjust that per site. So I'll give an example of here in Avonmouth for this station. Heavily industrialised area, minimal types of housing stock, because it's predominantly this side of the risk with businesses. They will carry out maybe more ops fire safety checks and home fire safety visits. But Kingswood, as Matt touched on, predominantly more housing stock, some areas of vulnerability, less business type of activity. So the crews will carry out more home fire safety checks and maybe more school visits. So that's the other priority for me. So they go hand in hand, so it's two priorities working side by side.
Apologies, if I may, just to further reiterate that, my improvements or the priority will be digitisation, and so that we can ensure that quality assurance accuracy. The second will be to ensure that we're balancing those activities, as the Assistant Chief has alluded to, and ensuring that stations are graphic equalised across the board. And that links into the local risk management plans that we're currently producing, and our colleagues spoke about that golden thread through the organisation. So once we're looking at capacity, we understand how we can balance that out across the stations, and then creating specific targeted actions against each station's local risk. then we will see, hopefully, an improvement in the use of that capacity whilst the organisation releases latent capacity through secondary systems improvement that then equate to additional hours on station for each team.
David?
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested in what feedback you got from firefighters about the logging process of their time, because I've worked in environments where I've had to log every 3 minutes of my time, and that was just too onerous and didn't actually work very well because everybody just falsified their data. So what feedback did you get from users?
So feedback initially wasn't very good. So the dichotomy of this project is that we're asking to measure capacity whilst increasing capacity drain by giving them an additional system to use. And there's a level of scepticism where crews are seeing this as a punitive action. This is, we're going to look at this, and then if you don't, there becomes something which is negative in the background. Through effective communications, we're able to talk through this with every team to highlight just how important this activity is, because fundamentally it links to central funding. And if it's not completed, we could see a reduction in funding. Where the organisation has been fragile in that area over the past few months and years, that is of interest to our teams. Once they were aware that it was important in that space and that we weren't going to become punitive with our responses to the recording, that engagement started. Once we had initial conversations with the Assistant Chief and the Head of Prevention Protection around what that data could be used for and how we could then extrapolate that data use into making changes day to day to their outputs, we communicated that really quickly and saw a surge in buy-in, and now our teams are actively engaged with this because what they're seeing is a positive outcome. The way that I would summate it is, for the first time as an organisation, collectively we are seeing that our operational teams are extremely busy, and potentially the climate and culture prior to this data was saying something which was opposite to that. So our crews are now saying we are busy, we're recognising that as an organisation, and so the buy-in is I'm seeing it across my teams and across the board, where crews are saying we know we're busy and now we're showing you we're busy, let's celebrate it. And actually the strategic use of that data to enable becomes a piece that we can do in the background, but crews have absolutely bought it.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This circles back to the 2021 inspection, doesn't it, which was picked out, and it's noted in the report. I think that's really helpful for the committee to note that. Very little capacity comes across really strongly in the report. I think you've mentioned that 3, 4, 5 times, and that's a key message. I've got 2 specific questions. One is around investment, and there's going to have to be investment, presumably in a digital system. I'm assuming you mentioned about Cornwall, Assistant Chief Fire Officer. However, there needs to be investment to improve this. And the other thing I haven't got a sense of here, and would be helpful, maybe it will be in the follow-up report, is what is the plan, the actual plan, clarity about that, and also the timeline. I don't have a sense of the timeline, because presumably this is something you're going to want to do at pace. I mean, not rush, but do it at pace. So those are my questions. It's about investment, and it's about is there a plan and is there a timeline? Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, so our Head of IT, Tom Luxon, has a plan which is detailed in our medium-term financial plan over the next 3 years. We've got a significant sum of money put aside for digital innovation and technology. This is emerged as a theme into this that we need to now look at as a risk and identify when we can fit that into our new DDAT, Digital Data and Technology project. So those conversations are currently taking place, but from my perspective, it needs to fit in and become more of a priority than other areas. But of course, that's my own view. Other directors or department heads will have their own view about their own priorities as well. So it's up for discussion where it fits in that pipeline of delivery.
Matt, I think the query from HMI was actually perfectly reasonable, and thank you for the presentation. Can I just, looking at it as a councillor, it just struck me that if you look at the left-hand side of the chart on 313, our outputs are, there's a lot of, if you like, other things which are going on in fire stations, and it just struck me that the outputs appeared to be quite low, and particularly in terms of the prevention and protection hours seem to be much lower than our targets, and therefore I actually then wanted to just challenge. You said no financial implications, but obviously the effectiveness of the front line is really, really important, has direct financial implications. So it's just something in my mind that I think it's great we're doing it, but I do think it's probably going to be a system that needs to be developed a bit more in the future. So I think the investment in a digital system would be really quite useful. But taking David's point, if we make this so detailed that people then don't use it or make it up, then I think then that it will then fail. So the other thing that I was particularly interested in is if you're shifting resources around between different fire stations, what's the timescales of that? Because you've got a demand-driven system. So how quickly will you then be able to shift those resources around? So sorry, that's a bit of a complicated question.
The physical resource doesn't move, but what we're seeing is that, say a job tasking comes in Longwell Green, then potentially the allocation of that sits with a Yate crew, and so we're seeing time loss in that transit period where the vehicle is moving. For certain elements of our business, certainly the risk assessments of properties in relation to firefighting activities and the site-specific risk inspections, there is benefit in having that transience. For instance, yesterday Patchway looked at Bristol Cathedral as a key risk, where that's come up as extremely high, and to share that instant knowledge or awareness around all our teams is a huge benefit. In relation to the graphic equalisation, at the moment, if we're trying to move productivity away from Avonmouth, away from Kingswood and give it to Avonmouth, where there's indicated this month that there is a small percentage of capacity, that may need to be a bit more intelligence-led further down the line, and we'll be working with Steve's team, because actually what we need to do is migrate jobs geographically as opposed to the vehicles to save time, and that's not a process that we've looked into so far. It's going to be a bit of a develop as we go and create that continuous improvement framework to adjust.
I think the other point, this data set is really valuable from my perspective in terms of service delivery and the resources on fire stations. If we wanted ever to move appliances from one place to another more permanently, that could be done, and this data set could be used to help make that decision, along with a whole load of other data from our CRMP team. But on a more granular level, when we're looking tactically with animal rescue or drones, and we're introducing new technology into stations, we'll be able to very quickly look at this data set and identify if there's any capacity on that station to introduce an additional training need, more response, because that specialist appliance will require more response, and then what the impact is. Or if we wanted to move it from location A to B with a drone as an example, we'll be able to see if they've got that capacity to take it on and what that leaves behind. So it's really, really valuable data set from that perspective.
Thank you, Luke. But it's early days. So would it be sensible for us in terms of the minutes to have a follow-up report in 6 months, 12 months? Which would you think would be sensible?
I'd be a lot more satisfied with 12 months, Joe, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay. So you can have 11 months holiday, Matt. So thank you very much. So this report is for scrutiny. So can I have a proposer? I'll propose it. Seconder? Good on you, Jane. Thank you. Right. So we'll put this to the vote then. Any against? Any abstentions? And all those for. So thank you very much, Matt. A really good report, and good luck moving forward. So we're now on the fire control culture review, and I think that's you, Luke.
Fantastic. This report is for the committee to scrutinise the progress made against the RSM recommendations. So in summary, this report provides a progress update following the cultural review into our control team carried out by RSM back in November 2024. The review identified formal recommendations structured around 4 cultural pillars of talent, customs, practices and structure. And since the last committee update, which was here on the 19th of September, the Control Shift programme has been continued to mature from an engagement phase into a much more structured delivery phase. Key developments since the last update include the continuation of staff engagement through a facilitated shift session, expanded use of feedback and visibility mechanisms, including what we call the Big 5 takeaways, which are included in the appendices at the back of the report. Progress continues across all 4 cultural pillars. I'll just go into each individual pillar to give you a brief overview of the progress that has been made. So in relation to talent, area 5.1, RSM highlighted limited development routes, perceived unfairness in progression and instability arising from temporary promotional arrangements, that is. So in line with the approach set out in September 25, we now have made permanent a control watch manager into a station manager position. This role is focused on progressing the implementation project for the ESN network, which is now ramping up, fire standards and national operational guidance. So that doesn't only give stability to one person's role as the station manager, this goes to every role beneath that person as well. So there's 4 people within that chain. Bespoke development input has been provided through control-specific inclusion training programme. This has been shaped by staff-selected topics and supports a more consistent understanding of professional standards and expected behaviours and contributes to massively strengthening psychological safety within those teams. Pillar 2, which is around customs practices and structure. RSM raised concerns relating to workload pressure, operational stability and structural factors that undermine effective day-to-day working. So the next phase of shift includes a clear focus on crew and stability, including confirming the crew position for this summer's period, co-creating continuity plans with staff and managers and implementing measures designed to reduce last-minute pressures and support a much more consistent service delivery. Work is also underway to introduce a communication support tool, which I can only describe as an AI bot, to assist in managing communications, fault issues, and aiming to reduce delays, improve consistency of information flow, and provide a more accessible support route for all staff. Pillar 3, starting from section 5.11, is around direction and leadership. RSM identified the importance of visible, aligned leadership and improving cohesion across the managerial group. So the premises team have obtained quotations to meet tender requirements for a communal office work for middle managers, enabling the co-location of middle managers into a shared working space. This is intended to improve day-to-day collaboration, increase cohesion and support a much more consistent leadership practice and comms across the team. A dedicated team building and development event is planned for watch, station, group and area managers and is focused on strengthening trust, relational connection and collective leadership. Pillar 4 starts on 5.16, is around transparency. RSM identified that limited transparency and inconsistent internal comms contributed to mistrust and perceptions of unfairness. So far we've had 6 structured shift engagement sessions and they've been delivered to date with each focusing on priority themes raised by control staff, so it's been driven by the control teams themselves. There are journey, ownership, communication, workload, intranet and a forward plan. And each session concludes with 5 big takeaways to reinforce transparency and confirm the immediate next steps, and they've all been agreed by the people attending those meetings. We're constantly monitoring workplace experience and we've seen some improvements with the scores that we've received back from people who attend the meetings and across the wider control teams. The mean score has improved from a pre-programmed baseline of 4.5, gone up to 1.69, so that's an equivalent 26% improvement against the baseline. In terms of culture, 5.23, RSM review structured its recommendations under the 4 pillars like I've mentioned. The Control Shift programme continues to prioritise lived experience, inclusion and transparency, supporting a shift towards greater trust and collaboration. And what I want to try to get across to members is this wasn't about ticking a box of the recommendations from RSM. This was about bringing people on the journey, creating psychological safety. It's taken time. We're not there with it yet. We have seen improvement. We've got 26% improvement in staff satisfaction, which is quite significant from where we were. I feel like we've got really good buy-in from members of staff, from managers across that team, and we've got strategic oversight up to myself and then into this forum as well. The shift meetings have gone now down to bi-monthly instead of monthly, and that's at the request of the control teams, because they feel like the improvements are being made, and some of them are more longer term now, more sustainable in that way. So that's going to be interesting to see how that develops. If we need to shrink back to monthly meetings, we can. I'll just leave it there and go to any questions.
Just before we do it, have you got any further comments you would like to make from RSM, Sam?
Probably nothing specific. It's a piece of advisory work we did, as mentioned, a year and a bit ago at this point. So from our perspective, we've handed over that responsibility to the organisation in taking the steps forward. It is, as was touched on there, elements of this will be able to be measured, but equally there are parts of it that aren't. And as touched on as well by Luke, there is elements of this which are just hygiene measures in terms of what are the base levels you need to ensure somebody's got security in their role, and then how do you build on that to ensure satisfaction and that, as you say, the psychological safety, that element of what they're able to do and feel satisfied and fulfilled in work. So there's nothing that I would particularly add. It's not something that we are tracking as part of our ongoing piece, but equally if there is a conversation to be had in the future, we'd more than welcome it.
Any questions? Yes, sir?
Thank you to everyone, external, internal, and also your team. My point is just to add, not question, look, how we can improve, or as like elected members also to support, because 26% is too low. How do you think we can improve the staff satisfaction percentage?
Good question.
So I think we're all striving for that continued improvement piece, and recruiting and looking at additional people to help us. So we've got our own cultural lead, and we've got our inclusion and diversity team who come across and do a lot of work for us within that space. So we've got the buy-in from people, which is the most significant factor for us. People are really engaged in this process, which actually says a lot about the change they want to drive themselves, and they're identifying the areas of improvement. Instead of it being done to them, it's being done with them, and they're coming on the journey with us. So I'm predominantly not going to a lot of those meetings. I'm staying out of the way, and they're driving it themselves, and I'm just having a much more strategic oversight than I normally would, but it seems to be an effective tactic in this particular team.
The time is going on. I've got a couple of quick queries just for afterwards, but one is IT, because quite often when you go and talk to the front line, there's issues around the IT systems. And the other is picking up Steve's point. Nowhere did we actually say in that report around learning from incidents, and I think that's something that should be built into that process. So shall we move on, because I'm aware that I've been an awful chair this morning, and we need to actually get a result on that. So I propose that we scrutinise. We've approved the report for scrutiny. Anybody second, Jane? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? All those who are for? Thank you very much. Right. I think, are we now coming on to the corporate risk register? Yeah. So Lorna, as usual, we put you right at the end. So over to you.
That's great. Thank you, Chair. Good morning again, members. So today I'd like to present this paper for your scrutiny. It's the full corporate risk register for presentation today. As you know, every other meeting you have, exception report today is the full register. So risk owners are regularly monitoring and reporting their risk events that sit within their remit. The current risk score is calculated based on their evaluation of how effective the controls are in mitigating against likelihood and impact, and they also take this into account in relation to the present risk environment. They also provide details of planned actions or any wider contextual factors that are relevant to the management of their risk. So if you can turn to page 200 in the pack, please, which is actually the second page of the cover paper. So the paragraphs under Section 5 give you the context of the current position overall in relation to corporate risk in the service. I'm not going to go through each point individually, but obviously happy to answer questions at the end. Just to particularly note paragraph 5.3, there is a summary of the risk category and risk appetite and tolerance changes that were rolled out in January. I did cover these in the member session that many of you were at in January. But just to sort of reassure, where changes to the levels have impacted on how the risk event is now being held to account, and sort of RAG rated and flagged throughout the following pages, I will draw attention to that, because there are occasions where it now appears that risk events have gone into the red and out of tolerance, but that's not because of an increase in risk score, it's because of change in the risk appetite and tolerance levels, or the riskometers as we like to refer to. So if you can go to page 203, please, this is where the dashboard of risk event scores are shown. And with the full report, you should now be used to this. This is the visual representation of risk events on our corporate risk register. And it shows the current risk scores as at the 28th of January when they were last reviewed fully by the senior leadership team. So the 50 risk events shown here are presented within each riskometer or risk category to which they align. Each risk event is held to account and colour-coded in relation to the differing risk appetite and tolerance levels for that particular risk category. Please note security riskometers not shown here, as those are in the exempt appendix, not for publication. So you can see 4 corporate risk events are shown in red font as they are out of tolerance, and 5 are written in blue where there has been a change since this last committee meeting in December. And so these 9 risk events are presented in detail in Appendix 2. So if you can turn to page 205, please. In this Appendix 2, we have the full risk event tables for the risk events that have received that additional scrutiny since this last AGOC meeting in December. I'm just going to very briefly go through each now. First of all, we have the 4 tables for the risk events with current risk scores that are out of tolerance or in the red, starting with CRO 3.3, which sits under response and rescue, loss of urban search and rescue capability. This risk event is now out of tolerance, not because of an increase in risk score, but because the people risk category was made more risk averse by the senior leadership team and senior leadership board. So planned actions are in progress to get the USAR capability back to compliance in terms of national resilience assurance. And again, happy to answer any questions or point towards obviously the operational staff here after this presentation. On page 206, we've got CRO 4.5, which is significant increase in sickness, absence and modified duties. Obviously, that has already been discussed partly today through Simon's performance report, and that's where there's that good alignment between different reporting mechanisms and scrutiny. So this risk event is actually now out of tolerance at a score of 18 possible major because of the change to that people risk appetite and tolerance levels. Previously, this wouldn't have been reported out of tolerance, but it now is, and that's welcomed by the senior leadership team. And there's a tremendous amount of work going on to reduce this risk event, being monitored through a number of work streams and reporting mechanisms, and sort of the interconnectedness between different risk events, including response and rescues and crewing levels and knock-on effects to key work streams. So on page 207, there are 2 pension risks under CR15. The first is one that you've had reported to you quite regularly now, which is the CR 15.3, failure to acquire accurate data from Bristol City Council. This has remained at a high score for a while, continues to be treated actually as a high priority issue, with ongoing actions to improve the situation and make sure it stays as that high priority. The second pension risk is CR 15.5, loss of or lack of pension advisor skills. Again, this has now come out of tolerance because of the people category riskometer change. The work to reduce this risk event is very nearly there in terms of progress made, and not far off this risk score being reduced. And then lastly on page 208 are the risk events where we have a change in risk score since this last committee meeting on the 5th of December. And there are 4 risk events that have had their risk scores reduced. We haven't got any that have had their risk scores increased in this report. So these include risk events around whole-time recruitment, 2 under business continuity, and the finance risk around resource and funding. I'm not going to go through each of these 4 in detail, you'll be pleased to know, but I'm happy to address any questions you may have at the end in relation to those 4 as exception. So the last risk event in this section is on bottom of page 211 and into page 212. I'd like to draw your attention to. It's a new risk event that's been added to the Corporate Risk Register, and that was approved by the SLT in January. It sits under control and mobilising CRO 6.6, failure to implement and test replacement mobilisation system within the planned timeframe. So it's a project and programme risk, and it's going to be here to support the management of the new mobilising system, which is obviously a massive piece of work, investment. It's going to help to support leadership, oversight, scrutiny, decision-making and allocation of resources, and obviously that will help you have insight into that as well. So, so again, any questions on that? And I'm working with the lead on that to develop the local risk management around that piece of work that can report into the Corporate Risk Register. So in terms of the remaining 3 appendices that support this report, Appendix 3 on page 213 provides the summary of all 50 risk events that are in the full Corporate Risk Register dated 28th of January. This hopefully provides you with the additional context for the current risk scores and assurance on how the risk events are being monitored by risk owners and service leaders. Obviously, at any point, any of you can ask to see any of the full risk event tables in the full risk register that relates to that Appendix 3. So please always contact if that's the case. And then Appendix 4, you've obviously got the risk scoring matrix and definitions of likelihood and impact. And Appendix 5 on page 219 shows you the current schedule for the planned corporate risk deep dive presentations to the SLT. We've actually reduced the number that go to SLT down from 3 to 2, but increased the amount of time that's spent on them so that they are more in-depth and sort of make sure they have that scrutiny they need, and we're not trying to cover too much on a lower detail level. So that concludes my presentation of the Corporate Risk Register. I'm happy to obviously answer any questions. Caroline, officers that are here, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorna. Bearing in mind that we are out of time now, what I'm going to suggest is I'll talk to Luke, but when we do the next agenda, I think we'll push this up the agenda so we can deal with the risk properly, because I think the great risk is we've all got things we've got to go on to. So a big thank you, because I think when we met the HMI, I know I was very, very supportive of the risk system that we've got, which I think is really excellent. So has anybody got any queries at this stage, David?
Yeah, just a brief question. Picking up on the deep dive, you've reduced that from 3 to 2 at SLT. Are you going to get sufficient coverage over a period of time to ensure that SLT is adequately reviewing all of the risks? Because clearly what we get is heavily influenced by the discussions at SLT. That's the question. Thanks.
Yes, this was something I discussed with Lorna. We went from 3 to 2 because what we were finding in reality, where we are really dynamic with deciding when we need to have more discussions about risks at SLT, that we were on a regular basis. We had 3 rotated, and then we'd have potentially another 2 or 3 come in that we were added short notice because something had triggered the need for a discussion, and we were finding it difficult to then be able to give the ones that are had a trigger happen the time they needed whilst doing the routine ones. So we made sure with the 2 that each one is still monitored at least minimum of once a year. We've also got a KPI that monitors that internally within my own department, which I keep an eye on to make sure that we're achieving that target as well. So in reality, we very rarely only actually have 2 deep dives go to SLT. I think I can't remember the last time that happened. It is more than 2, but that was to allow that space to be more dynamic and to deal with the ones we needed.
Can I just add as well that when we go into the exempt session, we'll be talking about the fact that this month we had 2 scheduled, and now we've put in an additional one for scrutiny because it's been flagged, and that space is allowed for that. And actually, good risk owner feedback, and it means that obviously when we do a deep dive, they will present all their risk events. But now with that space, that you can bring in a single one under a heading, rather than feel like we're not spending time on the right things. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. Tim?
Thanks. I'm aware of the shortness of time, so I'll be quick. I just wanted to ask about CR 3.3, the loss of the urban search and rescue capability risk. I mean, it's quite a serious risk. It says at the moment we don't have enough USAR technicians, that there is work ongoing to try to address that. Can you tell us how many technicians do we need to have, and when will we have them in place so this risk will be reduced? Thank you.
Councillor, if I may. So for a USAR deployment, we need 11 operators, a dog handler and a tactical advisor, and we have those all in service. On the times where we had the external audit from National Resilience, they chose a few dates in the year, and it wasn't numbers of staff that was picked up, it was the number of qualifications that those staff had. So within the KPI, although you've got 11 plus 1, within those 11 you need a number of timber shorers, a number of hot cutters, etc., and the minimum skill set. On the days they interrogated, we didn't meet the minimum number of skill sets. It wasn't a personnel issue at that point. To rectify that, it's been agreed with the head of operations that the USAR training team now trains dedicatedly 2 days a week, and we've seen a reduction in activity with prevention and protection to allow for that, and we've increased the number of KPI-based skill sets within each of those teams so that we will have a minimum level of crewing in that space. Whilst that's ongoing, the lead for the Urban Search and Rescue team, Area Manager Vaughan Jenkins, has instructed a look into the crewing arrangements of that team to see if there's alternate shift patterns or structures that we could implement effectively as an organisation to ensure that the risk from that coverage is then reduced. And it's mindful, and we should note that whilst this work is ongoing, the National Urban Search and Rescue Uplift project is ongoing, and we're going to see a change in our potentially structure of our USAR team, the equipment and skill sets that they are allocated going forward. Those two pieces of work are happening seamlessly. It all should be noted, and is of point, that in other areas of the assurance which was conducted in the Urban Search and Rescue team, we performed really well, especially in and around operational capability, training and the competence of our staff.
So just very briefly then, do we now meet those requirements, or are you saying on the paperwork element we'll be meeting that very soon?
Today I can't assure you of that because I haven't got the data in front of me. I'm confident that it's getting better and better every day as those teams are skilled up and we invest in that space.
What we do have is a capability that's whole time at Hicksgate, but we've also got support teams as well. So there are people who may have worked at Hicksgate on USAR before but then left to move on or get promoted or move to a different location. They still stay as a USAR operative and carry out periodic training. So we've always got 5 on duty, and then we send an alert out to other people around the service who build us up to 11.
Right, so just moving on then, because I'm aware of the time, are there going to be any queries around the confidential risk analysis to save us going into the confidential session? Nobody's raising a hand, so what I'll do then is I'll propose the risk register as put forward, including the confidential part. So all those in favour, all those against, any abstentions, and in favour. And thank you very much, Lorna, for what you're doing. And also, in the confidential session, we needed to approve the minutes of the confidential meeting.
You did that. You did that at the start, I think.
Did I? The confidential minutes, okay. Right, so I think we're now getting to the point where the next meeting is going to be on Thursday the 25th of June at 10:30. The location is still to be confirmed, and at this point then I'd like to take the opportunity, and I'm sorry we've run over a bit, but to thank everybody for a really progressive meeting, and I'll bring the meeting to a close. So thank you very much everybody, and thank you Zoe for keeping me in order. Okay, thank you very much.